welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect Voice of Analytics Innovation podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into end-to-end data management strategy. As businesses seek to gain insights from more elements of their physical edge, from factory sensors, myriad machinery, and across field operations, data remains fragmented. But a data fabric approach allows information and analytics to reside locally at the edge, yet contribute to a global improvement in optimizing large-scale operations. Stay with us now as we explore how edge to core to cloud's dispersed data can be harmonized with a common fabric to make it accessible for use by more apps and across analytics. To learn more about the ways all data can be managed for today's data-rich but too often insights-poor organizations, we're joined by Chad Smicky, Field Chief Technology Officer for Data Fabric at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hey, Chad, why are companies still flooded with data? They seem like they've got the data, but they're still thirsty for actionable insights. If you have the data, why shouldn't you also have the insights readily available?
There's a couple reasons for that we still see today that are challenges for our customers, which is one is just having some common data governance methodology for that. And what I mean by that is not just the security and the audit techniques around that, but just what is your data? I've gone into so many projects where they don't even know where their data lives. So just a simple matrix of where your data is, where it lives, and how it's important to the business is really the first step that most companies just don't do.
And so what's happening with data access? Now, when they decide that they want to find it, they start putting some categories and structure around it. What's been happening with data access and even API access and the explosive growth in unstructured data basically from all corners of an enterprise?
What we're finally seeing, I would say about 5 years ago, it was the Wild West of data access, but we're finally seeing some great standards be deployed for APIs for that data access. And what I mean by that is companies are now realizing there's power in having one API to rule them all. And in this case, we see mostly S3. There are some other great API SDKs out there, but just having the standardized API access into multiple data types has been great for our customers. But what we are seeing, again, as a standard is just having that one API access across different use cases. For example, that could be having BI tools come in over an API, or an application developer accessing the same API. So that really cuts down on my access methodology, my security domains, and just how I manage that data for that API access.
And when we look to get buy-in from the very top levels of businesses, why are businesses now rethinking data management and exploitation of analytics? What are sort of the business drivers that are helping technologists get the resources they need to do the job they want?
It's back to what I was just talking about. The business drivers there is they have to have it be as reusable as possible for these different use cases. It used to be you'd have different point solutions or different open source tools that would go solve a business use case needs. And that was great for the short term, right? Maybe it was a quarterly project or something, for the year you did. But then when you went down the road and went 3 years out and said, oh my gosh, we've got 10 different tools across these different use cases that we're using, it made it really hard to standardize for the next set of use cases. And so that's been the biggest driver, is just having a common, secure access layer, right, to access different types of data. That's been the biggest driver that we've seen for our data fabric. But again, having that common API access definitely reduces so much on the management layer costs, and then as well as security costs.
And it seems to me that commonality, when you can attain it, is sort of the gift that keeps giving,
yes.
Especially when we're looking at a spectrum of architectural types. We've got edge, right? We've got lots of different types of data, even from sensors and high-resolution video and that sort of thing. But we have the core data centers, sometimes co-located, sometimes dispersed around the world. And then, of course, as you mentioned, we have the cloud models and the impact that they're having. So what is it about the commonality that also helps solve these issues about disparate architecture and that continuum of deployment models?
You just hit the nail on the head. I mean, that having a commonality for that API layer really gives you the ability to deploy anywhere. And now I'm speaking, I'm taking my HPE hat off because I've built applications, supported operations before. When I have the same API set, it makes it very easy to go from one cloud provider or one solution to another. But putting my HPI hat back on here, that also can create some issues in terms of where my data lives. So you start to still have data gravity issues. And if you don't have that portability of the APIs and the data, then you start to see that you see some lock-in with either the point solution you went with or cloud provider that's providing that data access for you.
And then following through more on the gift that keeps giving idea, what is it about the data fabric approach that also makes analytics easier and maybe even starts to make a common method for applying applications into that into that analysis?
There's a couple things there. One is it allows you to keep the data where it may need to stay. So that could be from regulatory reasons or just depending on where I'm building and deploying my models. So it allows you to start separating out your compute and storage capabilities, but also keep them coupled for wherever the deployment location is. So I'll give you a good example. What a lot of our customers do today is they have the flexibility to deploy out in the edge, and that could be a smaller cluster, a smaller system that can pre-process data, but still slowly trickle in all the data back to one location, whether that's in a core or in a cloud location, giving them the benefit to push information out, but also continue processing at the edge, then make those data analytics solutions that they have deployed at the core even better for reporting or for model building.
So that really gets to this idea of act locally and learn globally. How is that important, and why are organizations interested in doing that?
Time. I mean, we want everything to be faster, and that's really what this gets you. In the past, when we've seen edge solutions deployed, you weren't processing a whole lot at the edge, and you were pushing all this data back to one central core location, and then doing something with the data. And we don't have that time anymore. Unless they've changed the laws of physics, last time I checked, they haven't done that yet. We're bound by the speed of light for these networks, and we need to push as much as we can out locally. But we need to still take in some of that information to one central location so we can understand what's happening at all these different locations and make the rear-view reporting better globally for our business, as well as any model management that we have globally.
All right, well, let's look at some of the hurdles that organizations have to overcome in order to make use of something like a data fabric. What is it about the way that data and information exist today that makes it hard to get the most out of it? I mean, we sort of alluded to this earlier, and there's always been the idea that there's so much more volume and velocity and so forth. But, when it comes to actually putting a data fabric in place, what is tough for people? Why is it hard for them to put that in quickly and easily?
It's tough for most organizations because you can't take the wings off the plane while you're flying. We get that. So you have to start creating some new standards within your organization, whether that be standardizing on an API set for different data types. That could be multiple data types or one data type. And then standardizing the deployment mechanisms within your organization for that data. And so with at least our data fabric, it gives us the ability to just say, hey, it doesn't matter where you deploy. We just need some x86 servers, and we can help you standardize either on one API or multiple APIs. We support over 10 today, right? But also the different data types that you have. And typically what we've seen is the silos are still out there today with customers, but they're getting worse. So what I mean worse is now they're all over the place between cloud providers. So I may use somebody's cloud storage bucket system from cloud vendor A, but I may use somebody else's NoSQL databases from cloud vendor B. And those end up having, their own access methodologies, their own SDKs. And then now you talk about having networking in the middle, and let's not even bring up, security and authorization to them. So we find that the silos still exist, but they've just gotten worse and they've just sprawled out more. I would call it the silo sprawl.
Wow. So if we have that silo sprawl now, and when that complexity is becoming a hurdle, the estimates are that we're going to just keep getting more and more data from more and more devices. So if you don't get a handle on this now, you're never going to be able to scale to what's expecting to come down the pike, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And it really comes down to, you're going to have diversity of your data. And the right way to do it is to make it use case driven. Absolutely. Don't boil the ocean here. That's where we've seen all of our successes. Bring it down to a couple different use cases to start, especially if you're getting into newer predictive model management, right, using machine learning techniques. But, you have to look a little further out to say, okay, what's next? What's coming, so that when you go down a data engineering or data science journey, you understand that, if I complete this use case A, this is going to lead to use case D, which means I'm going to have to go grab this other data source, right, to either enrich this model or create this whole other project or application for our business. So you got to create a little bit of a data journey and understand where you're going so you don't just have this silo sprawl.
I suppose another issue for organizations is their legacy installations, their solutions, their apps. When we start talking about zettabytes of data coming, what is it about legacy solutions and even the cloud legacy, right? There's sort of a cloud storage legacy now that we've been doing cloud for 10 years.
Yeah.
What is it about those that organizations need to perhaps rethink in order to be able to progress and scale?
Well, I mean, a very important point here. Can we just have a moment of silence that we're talking about zettabytes of data? Okay, I'm in. I remember 20 years ago we were talking about petabytes of data. We thought that was a lot of data. But if you look out, I think what you're talking about is there's been some studies out there about connected IoT or Internet of Things generating this amount of data. If you don't get a handle on where your data points are going to be generated, how they're going to be stored, and how they're going to be accessed now, this problem is just going to get worse and worse for organizations. And, that's not to say, look, Data Fabric is a great solution we have. It can solve a ton of these problems. But just being a consultant that I am, if you don't get ahead of those issues right now, what's going to happen is you're going to be under the umbrella of probably 20 different cloud solutions, right, for the next another 10 years, back to your 10-year point. So really, really need to look at the data types that you're going to have to support, the access methodologies, and where those need to be located and supported for your organization.
And Chad, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about how to manage big data, and Hadoop was a big part of that, and NoSQL and other databases, open source databases in particular, came about. What is it about the legacy, if you will, of the big data approach that maybe needs to be rethought or isn't as applicable as to the data issues we're talking about?
The one thing that we always saw that was a common issue was it would be either or. And what I mean by that would be, okay, we can do real-time analytics, but that's a separate deployment, or we can do batch, rear view reporting analytics, and that's a separate deployment. But one thing that our data fabric's always been able to support is both at the same time, and that's still true today. So if you're going down still a big data or data lake journey, I think now the term is called lake house. I don't know if you've heard that one, Dana. That's a new one, where basically I need to be able to do my real-time analytics as well as my traditional BI reporting, rear view reporting. And that's what we've been doing for over 10 years. So that's probably one of the biggest limitations we saw with implementations, other than a lot of the technical things like, it was a heavy lift to get it from one location to another just because of the metadata layer of Hadoop. And then you had dependencies with some of these NoSQL databases out there on Hadoop, which caused some performance issues. You can only get so much performance out of those databases, which, we have NoSQL database just out of the box with our data fabric, and we've never ran into any of those issues.
All right. Of course, we can't talk about end-to-end data without thinking about end-to-end security. So how do we think about a data fabric approach helping when it comes to security? Because increasingly, this data coming from the edge is extremely important, can be proprietary, and it can be also under regulatory scrutiny. So how does security come to bear on the data fabric solution?
Yeah, this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart because everyone always talked about these great solutions out there to do edge, but I would always ask, well, how do you secure it? How do I authorize it? How does my application authorization happen all the way back from the edge application to the data stored in the core of the cloud somewhere? And that's I call it auth sprawl, where those things just add up. If we don't have one way to secure and manage all of our different data types, then what happens is, okay, well, I have this object-based system out there and it has its own authorization techniques, it has its own authentication techniques, and oh, by the way, it has its own way of enforcing security in terms of who has access to what, and let's not even talk about monitoring, right? How do we monitor this solution? So now imagine doing that for each type of data that you have in your organization, whether it's something where it's in a NoSQL database because that application is just really driving the requirement for that, or a file-based workload, or a block-based workload. You can see where this starts to steamroll and builds up to be a huge problem with an organization, and we see it all the time. And by the way, when it comes down to your application developers, that becomes the biggest annoyance for them. Because now when they want to go and create an application, they have to go and say, okay, well, wait, how do I access this data? Oh, it's different. Okay, I use a different key, and then, oh, that's a different authorization system, right? Completely different way to authenticate it with my app. And I honestly think that's why we're seeing a ton of issues today in the security space, right? Why we're seeing people get hacked and it happen all the way down to the application layer, as you just have this auth and security sprawl that's making it very hard to manage all these different systems.
So we've come up with this word sprawl several times now, right? We're sprawling with this, we're sprawling with that. There's complexity, and then there's going to be even more scale demanded. So, the bad news is there's quite a bit to consider when you want end-to-end data management that takes the edge into consideration and has all these other requirements. The good news is is that a platform and a standards approach and a fabric approach is basically the best way to start accomplishing an awful lot and nailing down many of these requirements. So let's talk about the solutions. How does HPE Ezmeral generally and the Ezmeral Data Fabric specifically start to provide a common architecture for data and apps to get at many of these difficult, thorny problems?
I'll start with what we were just talking about with security. We provide the same security domain across all deployments. And so that means having one web-based UI or one REST API call to manage all those different data types. We can be deployed across any x86 deployment, and then just having that multi-API access. We have over about 10, and then even the multi-data access. Everything from storing data into files, and what we have upcoming here soon, storing data into blocks. We're going to be able to support blocks in our solution here soon. And then storing data into event streams, such as topics like Kafka, and then into a NoSQL database as well.
And it's important for people to understand that Ezmeral is a larger family and that the data fabric is a subset of that. But the whole, it seems to be greater than the sum of the parts. Why is that the case? Why is what HPE has been doing in architecting Ezmeral something that people should consider for more than just data management? In fact, it seems to accomplish quite a bit else.
Whenever you have this whole is greater than the sum of the parts, you just start reducing so many things across the chain when we talk about deploying any kind of solution. And so that means, how do I manage it? How do I update it? How do I upgrade it? How do I monitor it? And then back to securing it. And, honestly, there's a great report out there from IDC that says it best. We have a 567% 5-year ROI. That's not us. That's them talking to our customers. I don't know a better business value of a solution than that. So I'd say let that report speak for itself, but it just comes down to, these paper cuts of managing a solution. And when you start to have multiple paper cuts across multiple arms, it just starts to add up in an organization.
Chad, what is it about the Ezmeral portfolio and the way in which the data fabric fits in there that is a catalyst to more improvement? And how does it fit together? What is the larger proposition here?
Yeah, great question. There's a couple things on that. One is we still have this data fabric that can be deployed anywhere and can be deployed independently. We have hundreds and hundreds of customers. We have to continue supporting them on their journey of compute and storage. But we already today are shipping a solution where we can containerize the data fabric as a part of our Ezmeral container platform, and also provide you that persistent storage for your containers. So our Ezmeral container platform comes with the data fabric. It's a part of the persistent storage. And now it really gives you the full end-to-end management in containers for that, not only the application APIs that we were talking a lot about, but also the data portability. So now imagine being able to ship the data by containers for your location as it makes sense for your use case. So that's really the powerful message there is we've already been on the compute and storage journey, been down that road. That road's not going away. We have many customers where that makes sense for use cases, but we've already been on that journey of separating out compute and storage, and we're in GA today. There's some other solutions out there that are still roadmap as far as we know, but we're there today. We have this, customers have this deployed where they are going down their compute and storage separation journey with us.
One of the things that gets me very excited about the potential for Ezmeral is when you do this right and you recognize that you have to conquer those issues that are sort of blocking and tackling, it puts you in a position to be able to do really advanced analytics in ways that hadn't been done before. So the applications that can be applied and the analytics, and we sort of touched on this earlier, where do you see the Ezmeral Data Fabric helping when it comes to analytics and operational applications, sort of a higher level benefit when you put something like a data fabric in place?
Yeah, one of our CMOs used to say it best. His name was Jack Morris. He said, if it's going to be about the data, it better be all about the data. And whenever you take off all the things that it comes to manage data across multiple deployments, and this is from managing it to monitoring it to keeping it secure, you can actually go focus on those use cases. You can focus on the data itself that's living in a data fabric like ours. And that is the higher level takeaway here is I'm not sitting there spending all my time and my money worrying about the data itself. I can now go use the data for my organization for future use cases. And so the higher level takeaway here is that we set your organization up to use your data instead of worrying about your data. And we are set up to start using this data fabric for newer use cases of separating out compute and storage, having it run in containers. We've already been doing that for years. So that's the higher level takeaway is you can go focus on using your data and not worrying about your data.
And how about some of the ways that you're doing this? You've got things like global namespaces. You've got analytics ready fabric and native multi-temperature management.
Yep.
What are these? Why are they important briefly? And how does that get us to a place where we can realize some of those use cases that you're alluding to?
Yeah, with the global namespace, that's probably the top feature that we hear from our customers. And it allows them to give one view of the data with, again, the same common security model. And so imagine, if you will, you're sitting at your Windows computer, or if you're a Linux guy, you're sitting on a terminal and double click on your data fabric drive, or I'm in a Linux terminal, I type ls. I can literally see all my deployments globally. Let's call them US, EMEA, APAC. And that helps with discovery. That helps with bringing on board your data engineers, your data scientists. I mean, over the years, that's been one of the biggest things is they spend a lot of time, those organizations, right, that have built up data science and data engineering groups on just discovering their data. So global namespace means I'm reducing my discovery time to figure out where data is at. A lot of the analytics ready is just what we've been supporting in the open source community for over 10 years. There's just a ton of Apache open source projects out there like Presto and Hive and Drill. And then, of course, Spark Ready. We've been supporting Spark for many years. That's pretty much the de facto standard we're seeing when it comes to doing any kind of real-time processing or analytics on data. And then that multi-temperature, that allows you to decrease your costs of your deployment, but still allow managing all your data in one location. And so there's lots of different ways we do that. We use erasure encoding. We can tier off to S3 compliant devices just to reduce that overall cost of the deployment, and just makes it still easier that, hey, I have that common data fabric, I have that common security layer, and I have that common API layer.
All right, Chad, we talked about the issues of more data on the edge and how that's created a number of requirements in order to get a comprehensive approach to data management. We talked about the solution, the data fabric, and what it brings and how it works. But we've been talking sort of in the abstract. What about on the ground? Do you have any examples of organizations that have bitten off and made data fabric core for them as an adopter? What do they get? What are the use cases that you're seeing? What are the business outcomes?
We're talking a lot about edge to core to cloud here, and the one that's just top of mind is we have a big tier one telecom provider. So this is a provider that actually makes the equipment for your AT&Ts and your Vodafones that sit out on the towers, and they have many use cases. I think they've got over about 30 with us. But one of the ones that I love the most is they have this real-time antenna tuning, and so what they're able to do is they're able to improve their customer satisfaction, and they're able to reduce any kind of churn by responding to hotspots in real time on an antenna. But they're also able to do that by doing real-time data collection on those antennas and still aggregating that across their different layers that they have in their deployment. And so, again, they're able to do that with a central view of all the data, having a modern API for their DevOps needs, and then just still all centrally process that data, but also process it out on the edge, which they are doing today. We replicate that for them, we manage that for them, and we just take a lot of those things, those data management tasks, off the table for them so they can go focus on that use case.
So they've got that local benefit of tuning the antenna, but what's the global payback? Do we have a business quantitative or qualitative return for them in doing that?
Yeah, they're pretty secretive. I mean, we heard they've gotten a payback, in the millions of dollars, but it's the payback for them, though, is just reducing the application development spend everywhere across the layer, right? Is because I'm using the same type of API to publish that data to, in this case, it's a topic, it's a stream. I'm using the same API semantics to secure and manage it. They can take that same application now, which, by the way, is deployed in a container today, and easily deploy it in any location around the world.
Right. There's that key aspect of the application portability that we're dancing around a bit. Any other examples that demonstrate the adoption of data fabric and the business payoffs? There's
a bunch of others. Another one that comes off the top of my head is it's a midstream oil and gas customer here in the Houston area. And this one's not so much about edge to core to cloud, although they are working on a new edge use case right now. This is more about consolidation of use cases. So this is talking about earlier, we were saying, we can support rear view reporting analytics as well as real-time reporting use cases. And in this case, they actually have multiple use cases. So I think they're up to about 5 or 6 right now, but just 4 off the top of my head is they're able to do predictive failure on heat exchangers. And heat exchangers they're deployed in regional locations, and they're really, really temperamental. You got to be monitoring them all the time. But now they have a proactive model where they can do a predictive failure on those heat exchangers just by managing checking the temperatures on the FLIR cameras They bring in all real-time camera data, and they can predict, we think we're going to have an issue with this heat exchanger on this time and this day. So that decreases management costs for them. They have a dynamic parts management now for all their inventory management in their warehouses, so they can deliver faster not only on parts but reduce their capex costs. They have a material measurement balances. So this is when you push oil across a pipeline, they can detect where that balance is off across the pipeline and basically where they're losing money. Because if they're not pushing oil across the pipe at X amount of PSI, they're losing money. And so they're able to dynamically detect that and then fix it. So now where that issue is along the pipe. And they also have a pipeline leak detection that they've been working on, which is models to detect corrosion and decay. So that's a lot of information. The point there is multi-use case. Because they're able to start putting those data types together and continue to build off of it, every use case gets stronger and stronger.
Yeah, it becomes sort of a virtuous adoption cycle. The more you can use the data generally, then the more value, then the more you invest in getting a standard fabric approach, and then the more use cases pop up, and it can really get very powerful. And this last example you gave also shows the intersection of operational technology, so OT and IT, and getting people to think larger, not just about what happens at the edge, but how you can look at all of your edges, gather some analytics, and then start to apply a very high-level end-to-end business operational efficiency. Is that what you're seeing coming down the pike?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if I could say anything about our data fabric, it's kind of the Kumbaya Effect of these different groups. And what I mean by that is, as they're able to standardize on the IT side and on the developer side, it makes it easier for them to talk the same love language in IT, which is, and I've seen this with this oil and gas customer. It's now those data science and data engineering teams, they work almost hand in hand, which is really where you want to get in your organization. You want those teams working with the teams that are also managing your solution today. And that's what I'm seeing is as you get a better, more common data model or data fabric, you just get faster and you get better management savings by having your people working together.
And of course, when you're able to then start doing your procurement and your logistics and transportation and those other business functions and apply this logic from the edge and this data fabric to that, then you really start to get to what we're referring to generally as, digital business transformation. So last concept before we sign off, Chad, how does a data fabric contribute and support that larger goal of business transformation?
It really just allows these organizations to work together, having a common framework. And that's been one of the biggest issues I've seen when I come in and we say, okay, we're going to start on this use case. Where's the data? You're talking to, depending on the size of the organization, you're talking to 5 different groups, 3 different groups, sometimes 10 different people just to put this use case together. And as you start creating common access methods, you will see in your organization that it's easier and easier for not only your use cases, but your businesses to work together to that goal of whatever you're trying to do and use your data for.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how a data fabric approach allows information and analytics to reside locally at the edge, yet contribute to a global improvement in optimizing large-scale operations. And we've learned how HPE Ezmeral Data Fabric is making modern data management more attainable, so businesses can dramatically improve their operational efficiency and innovate from edge to core to clouds. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Chad Smickey, Field Chief Technology Officer for Data Fabric at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Thanks so much, Chad.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining us for this sponsored BriefingsDirect Voice of Analytics Innovation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise-supported discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your community and do come back next time.